Prophecy is the story of Jimi Hendrix as evolutionary mutation, with his remote view prediction of an asteroid path towards Earth. Rock Prophecy arrived at the Copyright Office in Washington, D.C. in June 1995. The manuscript was copyrighted on June 5th of 95, at the height of the Hendrix-Microsoft lawsuit proceedings, while Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen's legal teams were investigating my work and writings for the official Hendrix production company. Mr. Allen's team was suing us with a meritless harassment lawsuit. This is how the story of Jimi's asteroid prediction became known to Washington policymakers and their think tanks where strategies are fabricated for government policy. Their study of rock prophecy triggered an avalanche of media stories about rocks from space, led by movies from Paul Allen's media empire. They paid to have rock prophecy suppressed while at the same time acting upon what they read in the book. For example, in March 1996, 9 months after rock prophecy was studied by these agencies, the Republican candidate for president in '96 announced plans for a missile defense system designed to knock objects out of the sky.
The United States has no defense, and I repeat, no defense against ballistic missiles.
This is Bob Dole laying out a major theme in his campaign for the presidency: the need for a system to defend the United States from incoming nuclear missiles by shooting them down with other missiles or lasers.
From the start of this project, Pentagon priority was to conceal that the system is being designed for asteroids. Instead, they tell us that $250 billion tax dollars are being spent to defend us from enemy missiles. But many officials see how this Pentagon spin doesn't make any sense.
When we decided to do the Apollo project, we knew all the engineering. We talk about Star Wars as though all we have to do is decide to go, and we go, and that's just pure nonsense because the physics hasn't been invented yet to do Star Wars.
America's missile defense program has been called a failure and even a fraud by some prominent scientists.
I'm saying that there are people who know that this system will not work and are trying to cover it up. That's what I'm saying here.
It's not even possible for their missiles to distinguish decoys in space from real bombs. The Pentagon can't respond to this criticism because their system is really designed for asteroids, but they can't tell us that. In 1999, the book Rock Prophecy was published, and the book's introduction is a description of missile agency lies about the purpose for the system they're developing. For years, my book was the only media in the world with this insight. It wasn't until 3 years later, after my book was published, when my assertion that the missiles are really for asteroids was repeated by mainstream media. In July 2002, the PBS series McLaughlin Group aired this exchange.
I think the Bush administration ought to get that missile defense shield up and running and make
sure
it can handle the asteroid, because the asteroid is a real threat. We know it's out there, and those other threats are not quite as real as that.
And not only that.
The point is that Rock Prophecy pioneered this insight in the mid-1990s, and this is copyrighted and published.
Pertains to today, a national missile defense. They're going to lay that one all under next week. But they're ready to shoot down missiles. And it's not about missiles, it was always about asteroids. They make it look like it's about missiles.
As the years went on, we saw repeated media reports about missile agency test failures and setbacks.
Lieutenant General Ron Kadish's job is to shoot that target down.
How much does this cost, this test? The test is about $100 million. So we want to make sure that it counts.
First, the one balloon decoy, designed to confuse the kill vehicle, did not inflate properly. The general wasn't happy, but a few minutes later, he had an even bigger problem.
Not good.
It was an unexpected and devastating problem with the kill vehicle.
So that means it didn't work? Right.
If this were a real attack, the warhead would be continuing on to its target, an American city.
Sooner you know tomorrow's headline reads, "It didn't work."
It's another big disappointment for the Pentagon today. The latest test in an effort to develop a U.S. missile defense system was a failure. The Bush administration wants the system in place by the end of 2004. Today's experiment cost $80 million.
The test failed more fundamentally than even Professor Ted Postal could have imagined. But to him, it's just another in a long list of failures dating back to tests in the Reagan years.
In Star Wars, we were talking about X-ray lasers, and they didn't work. We were talking about deuterium fluoride space-based lasers, they didn't work. We were talking about hydrogen fluoride lasers in space, and they didn't work. We were talking about neutral particle beams, and they didn't work. We were talking about charged particle beams, and they didn't work. It just went on and on and on. Now we're down to interceptors, and they don't work.
It took them 2 years to prepare for this test, and to have it fail the way it did is a big setback.
The thought that there are rogue states with missiles of sufficient range to reach the United States from long distance is simply not correct. They just are not there.
Steinbrenner's view is supported at the highest levels of the American defense establishment. Steinbrenner argues the most realistic threat won't come from enemy missiles anyway.
It's not about missiles, it's always about asteroids. They make it look like it's about missiles.
Criticism of the cost of the missile system intensified. Public pressure was building to shut off funding of the program. The Pentagon can't tell us an asteroid is coming, yet they have to race to invent a missile system to try and deflect the rock. Ongoing reports of test failures had to be kept secret. What's needed is a blackout of news about failed missile test. The solution? On cue and as planned, Puppet Bush signs the prefabricated Patriot Act designed to silence news leaks about test results for his missile system. This news blackout is staged under a banner of national security, and no media has access to missile agency test reports. With the absence of news about billions lost on floundering missile systems, consumers file back to distraction with sitcoms and soap operas, while our tax dollars are poured into a new missile base at Fort Greely, Alaska. Then in 2007, the Pentagon quietly announces that their missile system is ready. But they're not required to prove it to the Americans who paid for this missile target charade, and no media even requests that the Pentagon prove their claim that it works. The point is that the missile system was instigated by rock prophecy, and White House officials covered up this fact. As we see in this next comment, covering up the real cause of concern is a common tactic of White House spin deceit.
And Vice President Cheney was the chief salesman. And so we're going to see that split screen of Vice President Cheney saying, Joe Wilson? Joe Wilson? I didn't know. Who was Joe Wilson? When we know from this indictment that behind the scenes they were obsessed with Joe Wilson and attempting to discredit him.
During 2003, I began a lecture and concert tour in Canada and the U.S. Throughout these shows, I included segments about the Apollo manned moon landings, which we see on screen in this video from 2003.